This Falcons offense has to find some consistency.
This is Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it's time for the Atlanta Football Party, only on Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Atlanta Football Party. I have the team with me today, Atlanta Falcons' own Tori McElhaney. I also have Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons, and I'm, of course, Jarvis Davis, sitting in the big chair today for Tanisha, and of course, she will be back partying with us on tomorrow. So you guys don't leave us because I know how much I love Tanisha, but she'll be back with us talking dogs. So make sure you guys stick around for that. And also a friendly reminder that the Locked On Sports Atlanta is free and available wherever you download your podcast. Wherever you download your podcast, make sure that you leave us a 5-star review. We won't accept anything else, because you know how great we are when we're talking about these Falcons. You know, that's my West Side pronunciation of that word. So yeah, y'all stay with me today. We're going to try to get through it. And I also want to remind you that today's episode of the Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. The Atlanta Football Party is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And coming up on today's show, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have made their point in the NFC South. Can the Falcons prove theirs on Thursday? And Troy Andersen has shut me up for now. But first, we got to get into it. The Falcons get the dub against the New Orleans Saints. And in the fashion that we're used to the Falcons getting wins against this New Orleans Saints team, because we understand how just absolutely annoying this team can be. So it was good for Younghoe Koo to hit that 58-yard field goal to get the Falcons' first win in the division in the NFC South. So I think, Tori, the one thing that I'm kind of thinking about, as we go along, because we coming into the season, everybody was looking at the schedule and saying, okay, how can the Falcons? How can you feel good about the first 4 games of this season? What does the record need to be? Now there's right here. We're here right now, looking at the record, saying, okay, they're 2-2, and they probably should have won that Kansas City game if you want to have a real conversation about it. So for you, Tori, where are you as far as having a grasp on this team? Do you feel like you have a good grasp on who this team is 4 games in?
I feel like I have a good grasp of who this defense is and who this special teams unit is. I don't think I have a grasp yet of what this offense could be, because I don't think they have reached the proverbial glass ceiling, so to say, of what they can be. And I think they would all say the exact same thing. But to your point, I go back to where I was at the beginning of August. I remember saying multiple times that if Falcons can get out of the first 4 weeks of the season at 2-2, you will take that every single time. Now, I was not expecting the 2 wins and the 2 losses to shake out how they did. I don't think anyone kind of did, but
Yeah.
you do feel like and if you were gonna go 2-2, and if you were gonna win 2 games, it might as well be in the NFC. If you're gonna lose, you might as well lose out of the conference. So for that reason, I'm really okay with where they are, and I think that it really is one of those things where I look at where I thought they would be versus where they are now. I thought that the offense would be a little farther along than what they actually are 4 games into the season. But the defense is kind of playing fairly kind of like how I thought they would. I
Yeah.
never really questioned Younghoe Koo ever, despite everyone being on my case in the preseason about Younghoe.
Talk that talk,
Like,
Tori. Yeah.
I
They were on
mean,
you.
they were on me. And I would just like to say I got the last laugh, but it's neither
Absolutely.
here nor there. So all of that to say, I'm okay with where they are right now, but okay is kind of a moot point, because you want to feel better than okay. You want to feel good. You want to feel great. You don't want to be like, I'm okay. And that's kind of where I am right now.
And I think you make a great point, because one of the things that I feel as a old school football head, I think I can throw myself in that category, right? Like I love
Sure.
having defenses that you can count on to get a
Yeah.
pick six and take it to the house like that. Yeah, sign me up. And then when you think about the last one that we saw, it was against the same team, and it was Mr. Bates, Mr. Thurston the Third. I've kind of given him a nickname, so I don't know if I like giving nicknames. I don't know if you noticed just yet, but
I have noticed.
yeah.
And I
So
just let you do your thing.
yes, thank you. I appreciate that. That's gotta let me live, baby. Just gotta let me live. I love it. I love it. So I think that's the main thing that I feel like fans are probably going to have to get used to, because I feel like I can believe what I see through the first 4 games with this defense. So I'm in a space where I'm okay with that, right? And if this defense can be good enough to allow this offense to kind of figure things out, and we're going to talk about the whole Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier dynamic in just a little bit, but I'm okay with them trying to figure that piece out while this defense, which you spent a lot of money on,
Yeah.
a lot of money invested in this defense. So hey, they're starting to give you some of that kickback that you invested in. So I'm totally okay with that. As far as you go, Aaron, like how the Falcons sitting at 2-2. Do you feel like you have a better grasp on who this team is, or are you kind of in the wings like Torrey is, as far as this offense? No, not really, but a defense. I kind of feel like this is probably who they are going forward.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as Tori. I feel like the defense has kind of lived up to what my expectations. I didn't have these expectations going in the season that this was going to be a top 10 defense, but the hope for me was this defense will be good enough for the Falcons to win games. And I think they've played that way for the most part in the first 4 games. As I've said many times on the postcast, they're doing a little bit more bending than I would ideally like,
Sure.
but they're not breaking. And so I think that's really what they're trying to do. I think offensively, yeah, they're still a work in progress. I think their identity is they want to be a run first team. That obviously did not manifest in this Saints game, where they kind of got out of balance in terms of running the football and circumstances, all that stuff that go into that. But it does feel like they're trying to be this run team, and they're still trying to figure out the passing game at this point in time. I think there are signs of progress for over the first 4 games, but it's still probably going to take some time for this offense to really start hitting their stride, where they start living up to the expectations that I think a lot of people had going into the season, where I think a lot of people legitimately thought this offense has the capability of being a top 10 unit if and when they start clicking. We haven't really seen that through 4 games, but there's still a lot of football left to be played, and we'll see if they can figure that out, over the next 13 games.
And Aaron, that was kind of interesting on the Falcons postcast. By the way, hit that bell, and subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube, and also make sure you subscribe on wherever you download your podcast, because hey, you want to get that notification when we drop that postcast right after, well, kind of after the game is over on Sundays when the Falcons play. So make sure you guys check that out. And I thought that you said something really interesting that kind of stuck out in my brain. Say you're fine with getting the ball in Bijan's hands in space, and then turning around and handing the ball off to Tyler Algier. And like, hey, if that's what it is, kind of let that be. So are you on board with Zach Robinson taking that approach going forward? Or could that be the formula to get this offense where it needs to be, which is scoring at least 28 to 30 points a game? Because I know coming into the season, I said 25, but if they're able to get that dynamic going with Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier, just finding some type of balance, not saying that it has to be split even 50-50, but finding that balance with these running backs, do you feel like that's the key to be able to get this offense to get some consistency?
Yeah, I think we'll see, right? Like I think the Falcons, when it comes to their running backs, I think the goal should be in every game to get Bijan 15 to 20 touches,
Sure.
and then Tyler Algier fit in when you get in. I would basically say I wouldn't go into any game expecting to give Tyler Algier more than 5 to 8 touches in a game, but in a game like we saw this past Sunday against the Saints, if he's the hot hand, that's when I think you sort of make that in-game adjustment where it's like, hey, this run game is working when Tyler Algier's out there, and now we need to feed him in that regard. So I think you got to find that balance. But I think in general, when it comes to Bijan and Allgeier, like Bijan to me still should remain the breadwinner because he can do so much things with the ball in his hands, not only as a pass catcher, but also as a runner. You haven't really seen that on the field the last couple of weeks, but you just want to keep feeding Bijan and let him do Bijan things. But I think that dynamic with those two guys in the run game, like I think the goal is to get Bijan the max touches and feature Allgeier as much as you can when you're not featuring Bijan. But in a game like we saw on Sunday where Allgeier proves to be the hot hand, I think it makes total sense at that point in time to like, hey, let's go to a more of a 50-50 split, or even maybe a 60-40 split in Allgeier's favor if these in-game adjustments prove to be the case, right? You can't just basically go into a game being like, oh, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and then midway through the game, it's like, well, X isn't working and Y isn't working. So, you got to make adjustments. And so I think that's really where the Falcons need to be at.
Yeah, that's the point that I was going to make. It's like you go into a game and you can have a game plan all day long, but at the end of the day, it's like, what is the defense giving you and what's working? And you can plan all day long to give Bijan however many touches you want to give Bijan and have, those little screen passes up for him every 5 plays or whatever you want. You can do that, but if it's not working, it's not working, and you have to go with what's working. And I mean, to kind of go off of, I'm in the exact same boat as Free, where it's like I don't foresee it being a 50-50 split between Tyler Allgeier and Bijan Robinson, just because of the way that you can use Bijan Robinson and kind of the more traditional way that you can use Tyler Allgeier. I don't think that is a bad thing. Like I see a lot on, social media of like, why are we not giving the ball to Tyler? Why are we not giving the ball to Tyler? And I understand kind of why people are saying that, but I also don't want to get to the point where it's like, oh, you are only one dimensional with Tyler Allgeier and that's all you can do as an offense in terms of running the ball. I don't, teams are going to pick up on that. Like I like the way that they have been kind of splitting it out. I didn't like how in the first game against the Steelers, like I felt like it was maybe a little bit too much Bijan, which I didn't really realize that was going to be a thing that I ever thought possible.
Yeah.
But I think they've gotten more into the scope of being more cognizant with Bijan's touches and how they're using him. And, right now it's just Tyler Allgeier is working. So I don't know. I don't know it's not a good, I feel like we haven't gotten a big enough sample size to be able to be one way or the other, because I'm not willing to take the ball out of either of those guys' hands, if I'm being completely honest.
Yeah, so Zach Robinson's job is hard. Let's just say that.
Yes.
First year play caller,
Don't
you
envy.
got Bijan is so dynamic in what you do, just giving him the ball, whether you're turning around and handing it off to him or you're passing it to him and getting the ball to him in space. I just think that is so, but like Tyler, when he comes in, he just runs with such a ferocity that I'm like, man, you got to give him the ball some way, somehow, because the dude is hungry and you can tell he wants it when you do get him the ball. So I think this is going to be something that I feel like, talk about it on the postcast also about, getting into a flow as a play caller. Like, a lot of times, like, you can't force feed, like you mentioned, Tori, you can't force it if like, hey, this is what we want to do. But if that team is stopping that, like, what are they giving us that we can take advantage of so we can get this ball rolling? And once you get the ball rolling, then you can kind of sprinkle in some of those things that you tried to do initially that wasn't working, to kind of, mix it up and keep the defense on their toes. So I think that's the big thing for me as far as this offense. And I like you said, Zach has a big task on his hand because the expectations were super high this year, coming with all these weapons and, Kyle Pitts. And I know I took it off the rundown, but I have to ask about that. We're going to get into that a little bit later. But first, y'all, Troy Andersen shut me up in a big way on Sunday. But will he continue to make that noise on Thursday? We'll discuss. This episode of the Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by Game Time. Let me tell y'all something, man. I have been racking my brain trying to figure out how I'm going to get tickets to take my dad to Atlanta Falcons football game when they play the Dallas Cowboys. Yep, he is a Dallas Cowboy fan. I don't know why. I'm still trying to figure out to this day, but it is what it is at this point. I'm trying to get some tickets to it so I can take him to the game. And you know what? Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your live events even easier. So you know where I'm going. I'm definitely going to it too. And also, Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands and thousands of tickets. I promise you, I don't want to do that. So here we go. All you got to do is take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Yes, you heard that correctly. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today, because what time is it? It's game time. I want to thank you for making the Atlanta Football Party your first listen of the day. Why don't you stop by the Locked On Falcons, Aaron Freeman, who's on this show right now, and make him your second listen of the day. He's free and available wherever you download your podcast. And wherever you download your podcast, make sure you share those 5-star reviews, because I'm tired of y'all talking about my boy Aaron, talking about how he's all petty and stuff. Man, that man was smiling. I was texting him during the game and everything. The dude was just laughing and smiling and all that stuff, man. He sent me a selfie. You know, when Troy took that kick to the house, man, I'm just like, he's just making me feel so bad. But you know what? I am proud of Troy Andersen, y'all. I am proud of this man, because one thing about being looked at as being overdrafted, like you almost feel like it's almost like you have to feel like you have to prove yourself time and time again, because I think that, or justify the pick, right? Because especially with the Falcons trading up for Troy in the second round of that draft, I feel he's in a space where he's starting to get a little comfortable, right? Of course, I would love to see more, because my expectations are, I can be hard to please sometimes. I don't know if you noticed that, Tori, but I can be a little hard to please sometimes.
Yeah.
So, but I think right now, with Troy being injured later on in the fourth quarter, I want to kind of get your thoughts on, are the Falcons in a space now where they're going to have to depend on JD Bertrand, or if he doesn't play, or do you feel like they're probably trying to work in the phones right now to get some vets in that they previously worked out some linebackers before? So do you feel like those guys, do they make a call to kind of, hey, we might not have them, so we don't want to solely depend on JD Bertrand, but we want to get some vet help in here to kind of make that transition a little smooth?
Yeah, I would. I know no one's calling me, but I would. I don't know the extent. I'm sure we'll find out later today, kind of the extent of Troy Andersen's injury. You do hope for the best, but Nate Landman's on IR, and he has to be on IR for another couple of weeks. So I am worried about inside linebacker depth if Troy Andersen cannot give it a go on Thursday. The problem, though, is that the Falcons are in right now is that, okay, you can go out and get somebody and you can kind of try and build up some veteran depth and work it out. But, you're on a very short week. They play on Thursday. They literally play in 3 days. So there's really, even if you go out and get someone, I do think that you have to rely on Caden Ellison, JD Bertrand, if Troy Andersen can't go, because of the nature of the quick turnaround that you have from game to game this week and being on a short week. I don't know if you can get even the veteran of all veterans, coming in on a short week and being expected to play with a unit on a Thursday night game is not an easy task at all. So I would be calling people for sure, but I don't know if it's calling people to get a starter in here potentially. I think it's calling people to build depth in case the worst happens and you're just kind of out of luck with your inside linebackers. And I think, you didn't get to see a lot of JD Bertrand on Sunday night. He came in for, I think, a series and a half, maybe. But because I know that right when Troy Andersen got hurt, it was on a punt. And they ended up on that next little series, that next defensive series, I believe, like Caden Ellis, they only went with a 1 inside linebacker set, and they were in their nickel package and had an extra outside linebacker. So all of that to say, I think they'll be okay. I mean, you hope for the best. You hope Troy Andersen's fine and he can go out and play and start, and it was just kind of a dinged up thing and they were being cautious about it. But if it's not, I would be on the phone to get depth, but maybe not potential starters.
Yeah, so it sounds like to me, T, that you're gonna be Captain America this. Well, at least for now.
Yeah,
Hopefully,
at least for
hopefully,
now.
right? At least for now. So I because and that's unfortunate because I mean Troy had 16 total tackles, career high, 9 solos, career high. And when you think about him having back-to-back games with double-digit tackles, it feels like he's just finding that comfort. Well, I think it's only his 10th start since he's been in the NFL. So when you think about it from that aspect, that it's like when a player finds comfortability like that, you know, during the end season, it lets you know that because I know people want to focus on the 16 totals. Like the couple things that I'm going to focus on is that TFL. Like he's coming downhill. That's how he knows he's able to diagnose that play instead of, chopping his feet and then kind of, hitting the running back on the side and him kind of falling forward for 1 or 2 more yards. So when I started to see him come downhill, making tackles in the backfield, that's when I got excited. I was like, okay, this dude is really starting to find himself. So it's just truly unfortunate. But Aaron, I want to kind of hear from you as far as, do you feel like this is a Captain America type situation, or should they go out and pick up the phone right now and just, hey man, get somebody in here because, the inside linebackers need help. There is a big red flag coming out of that linebacker room right now.
Yeah, no, I think they can roll with Captain America, JD Bertrand, in the short term. I know they picked up some linebackers that have some starting experience on their practice squad with Monty Rice and Josh Woods. I haven't been that impressed with those guys when I've watched them in the past start games, but at the same time, like, beggars can't be choosers at this point in time. So I think having 2 guys that have started games in the NFL at that linebacker spot that have been on the team for a couple of weeks now. I think they picked up Josh Woods like 2 weeks ago, and I think Monty Rice at the beginning of the season. So those guys should be ready to go if you need them to sort of step into the lineup, especially this week. Obviously depending on what happens, I think on the short week with the Bucs, then, maybe you have to, you get a little bit more of a layoff and maybe you have to sort of revisit that conversation in terms of depth. I know they worked out Quan Alexander a couple of weeks ago and sure. I think he's now on the Broncos practice squad. I know they brought in Rashaan Evans. I don't know if he got picked up by another team or whatever. So there are options out there if the Falcons want to explore external options, but I do think you have enough internal options. And, I think JD Bertrand, as Tori said, like, he hasn't gotten a lot of work up to this point on defense, but what little work he's done, he's seemed to be fine, I think. And so why not see if you have
see ball, get ball, pretty much.
Yeah, and see what you have.
Yeah, make it easier.
Exactly.
So, I think with Troy, like, if his injury lingers, that is going to be a concern because that's been the issue with Troy so far, where, like, when he's starting to make strides, something happens to kind of derail that sort of thing. But, like, I think he's coming off a game, like we talked about it on the postcast, Jarvis, where it's like, I think these are the types of games that you get excited about what Troy Andersen is going to do because, while Alvin Kamara did have a productive game in this game and made several plays in this game, when the Falcons were bottling him up, it tended to be because number 44 was around the ball, and that sort of athleticism that you have at that linebacker position is kind of the perfect foil for a playmaker like Alvin Kamara. And so hopefully, this injury is not going to be something that's going to, keep him out of the lineup for any significant amount of time. And so later in the season, you'll be able to have that sort of potential X factor, as you're right, like 10 starts into his career, people, you kind of have to kind of treat him a little bit like a rookie. And if you sort of look at those 10 starts in one season and it's like, hey, there's signs of progress here. This is trending in the right direction with him. So we'll see what sort of happens with him.
No, to that point too, something that I think it was Jarvis that said earlier is like being in a flow as a play caller, but you also have to get into a flow as a player. And Troy Andersen has never started more than 4 games in a row. Like to your point, Aaron, about like, okay, yeah, 10 starts, but that's 10 starts over 3 years. Like it's a lot of starting and stopping, touching and going, injured, healthy, like rookie year, trying to get him in where we can. It's not very like it's not been consistent. Like the playtime, the starts have not been consistent because by nature, and because of what's happened. So I do think that you don't give someone the best opportunity to be the playmaker that they can be when they're not out on the field and they're not getting a feel for the unit around them. They're not getting into a game flow. They're not getting in a weekly flow. So I think for the context of Troy Andersen, that piece of it is huge in what he can be, what he is, and what his like top out should be.
All right, y'all. So I appreciate you making that point, Tori, because players are creatures of habit, and when you talking about getting into the flow of things, it's probably more important for players to be able to do that, because especially when you're talking about being a productive,
Yeah.
living up to expectations type player. So I think that was an excellent point. So guys, I'm gonna call a little audible here. Want to talk about, give a quick preview on the Panthers, but I feel like we have to talk about this Kyle Pitts situation, and we'll talk about that next right here on the Atlanta Football Party. Don't go anywhere. This episode of the Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans. Hey, Falcons fans. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Guess what, guys? The Falcons play on Thursday night. So here's what I need you to do. I need you to go to FanDuel.com and take advantage of this -2.5 point spread that the Falcons are favored by against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm telling you, they're coming off a win against the New Orleans Saints. Younghoe Koo did his doggone thing. They're hot right now. So go to FanDuel.com. I'm telling you, because when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. It's super easy to use, guys. I'm telling you, go to FanDuel.com right now, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed. I promise you. When you place your first $5 bet, that's FanDuel.com. So make sure you guys go check out FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. Yes, we're wrapping things up here on the Atlanta Football Party. I got AtlantaFalcons.com on Tori McElhaney and Locked On Falcons, Aaron Freeman. Y'all know who he is. He's the man with the master plan. I'm just holding it down in this seat today because, Tanisha's out here. So here we go. All right, y'all. I think that, when you think about what Kyle Pitts, I remember us vividly having this conversation about, what type of player is going to have a breakout year on this offense, given with all the additions, right? Kirk Cousins and Zach Robinson and this offense, and just really getting him back to what we saw from him when he was playing with a very much capable quarterback in Matt Ryan. So but I'm sitting here looking at the numbers for this year: 8 catches, 105 yards, and half of that he got in 1 catch against the Kansas City Chiefs. So what is it? What is it, Aaron? What is it? Is it a Kirk Cousins type situation? Or is the synergy not there? Or are we just talking about Zach Robinson not necessarily putting enough effort into specifically trying to get him the football when he's coming up with these game plans each week?
I think it's a lot of the things you named. Like I think on yesterday, it was just Kyle Pitts not catching the football in the situations that he was given. And that needs to change. Like, you're not getting a ton of opportunities in this offense as much as I think people thought you would. And so when you get those opportunities, you got to take advantage of those opportunities. And Pitts didn't do that against the Saints. I think overall, though, I do feel like his usage in the offense has not been a huge part of the offense. Obviously, there have been times, especially against the Chiefs, where they have maybe used him more, but it hasn't been a consistent thing. I think that's something that the Falcons are going to have to continue working towards. Like, for me, watching Kyle Pitts in this offense, it's very reminiscent to me of watching Tyler Higbee in the Rams offense. And, to me, like, that's fine when you're Tyler Higbee and you're primarily there to be a blocker and you have all this talent at the wide receiver position. And I think with the Falcons, like, getting Pitts more involved and being more of an X factor in the passing game, I think needs to continue to be a goal. I think at some point we'll get that sort of breakthrough, and hopefully this won't be a conversation in future weeks. But obviously, through 4 games, it hasn't been good enough, I think, with Kyle Pitts, with Zach Robinson, with Kirk Cousins. So I think it's all the factors sort of coming together. This team went into this season basically, they revamped their wide receiver position, but a lot of what this regime was basically saying is like, we've already assembled the high level talent with Drake London and Kyle Pitts, and it's up for now. We have a quarterback that can unlock that talent. Now we have a play caller that can unlock that talent, and you're not quite seeing that so far through 4 games. And I think that's leading to some of the inconsistencies that we've been talking about with the offense not living up to expectations. And so once you can start making Kyle Pitts and Drake London and all these other players reliable, consistent producers week in and week out, that's when I think the offense will reach its fully formed, sort of status.
And one of the things that I heard yesterday, I don't know how I feel about it just yet. Raheem Morris dropped after the game yesterday. He dropped the stats of a losers type when they were asked about Kyle Pitts. I was like, don't do that. You're gonna send some triggers, man.
I heard that before. Yeah.
I was just like, we've heard that before. People don't want to necessarily hear that. So for you, Tori, have you kind of put your finger on this thing, or do you feel like you have a good feel like, okay, what is it? It just seems like it's just something is missing when it comes to Kyle Pitts having been a productive football player with a more than capable quarterback.
No, I don't have an answer. I'm sorry, I really don't. I've watched all of these games multiple times through. I have zoned in on Kyle Pitts multiple times, and I don't have an answer. I don't have the answer. And I also don't think that, there are times where the ball's not getting thrown his way. That's just when you have Drake London, Darnell Mooney, Bijan Robinson, you have options. If Kyle Pitts isn't the first read, or he's kind of covered up immediately when Kirk Cousins looks at his first read, that's just a part of the game. However, when you look at a game like last night on Sunday night against the Saints, and Drake London has double-digit targets, and Kyle has 3, and it's a little lopsided, and a lot of it lopsided.
Yeah,
that to me is an interesting trend, and I don't know why. I don't know why that is. I don't know. I couldn't tell you one way or the other, which I realize is it's my job to tell you why things aren't working or why things are working, but
sure.
I don't have an answer, and I just don't right now. And Kyle Pitts has been open, he's been targeted, he's made catches, he's not made catches. I don't know.
I think one of the things that concerned me to start the year, just from a chemistry standpoint, it seemed like something was a little off between Kirk and Darnell, and they have seemed to figure that thing out. And I'm wondering what Kyle Pitts is doing to try to get this thing right, because I know Kirk, it was very sobering in a post-game press conference. He's like, hey, man, I got to play better. I know we got to win. And I know he's going to send in a whole bunch of voice memos to Zach Robinson, trying to figure out how to get this offense going and scoring points consistently. So I'll be interested to see what that looks like Thursday night. Kind of just want to get you all's thoughts on it's Thursday night game. Ty Bowles coming in town. We know what he brings defensively. Baker Mayfield is just playing absolutely out of his mind, or he's playing like he was before, being the number 1 overall pick for the Cleveland Browns. So for you, Aaron, where are you with this game as far as coming off a big win against New Orleans Saints, going into trying to win back-to-back divisional games? Where are you with that, and how do you feel like the Falcons could potentially get them a win on Thursday night?
Well, going into the season, I looked at this 2-game stretch between the Saints and Bucs, and I was like, I would love to see the Falcons go 2-0 in the stretch, but more than likely they'll probably go 1-1. So now that they got the 1, I'm not going into this game with a ton of confidence on the short week, but like I think the challenge with the Bucs is always going to be those two really good wide receivers that they have, and Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. And so far this season, we haven't really seen the Falcons go up against an offense that has like a 1A and a 1B, right? Because AJ Brown missed the Eagles game, and it's Travis Kelce hasn't been Travis Kelce, with Rashee Rice and whatnot, and Olave was a little nicked up against the Saints game. So like that's going to be the challenge where it's like, okay, if AJ Terrell locks down one side of the field, it's kind of like, oh, okay, like the last 4 weeks has been like, oh, well, we kind of took away whoever their number one is, but it's like, okay, if AJ Terrell locks down his side of the field, then they still have another guy that they can just run their offense through. So I think that's going to be the big challenge for the Falcons. So we'll see. Like that's why I'm like sitting here like feeling good that the Falcons won against the Saints, feeling great that the Falcons won against the Saints. But that's to me going to be the biggest challenge is like how does the secondary getting challenged by Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, how do they hold up against those guys?
Yeah, I think for me too, it all comes down to, which is wild because we're talking about a game that Falcons are coming off where the offense didn't score any points, and we're still talking about like the defense is going to be the crux of whether they win or lose, which makes total sense at this point.
Sure.
But what's interesting is I do think I feel very similar going into the Bucs game as I do how I felt going into the Saints game, where it was like you knew that the Saints were going to score. You knew that they were going to have some explosive plays. You knew that they were going to run the ball. Like you knew that they had a high-powered offense and had been able to show that over the first 2 of 3 weeks of the season. I feel very similarly going into this Bucs game where it's like I think the Bucs are going to get their yards. They're going to get their chunk plays. Like it's all about not necessarily like limiting those, but finding your footing as a defense to make sure they're just not scoring. Like that's the thing. It's like if this is who the Falcons are, if this is their defense, a bend but don't break group, and that's their identity. That's their identity, and you know what you have, and you know what you know they're going to get. 15 yards a pop with Mike Evans at one point or multiple points, but it's all about coming back and coming up with the stops where they need it most. For me, it's almost the exact same game plan going into. I literally said, I was like, okay, if Jarvis, I think we were in the press box and I said this to you.
Yes,
I was like, okay,
before the game,
this exact same
Yes.
thing. I said,
Absolutely.
I was like, if the defense can go out and just like hold their own, make sure they're not getting in the end zone, and the offense scores points, they'll be fine. And I even said, I was like, if the offense doesn't hold up their end of the bargain, this thing could get weird and it could get not good. And what's hilarious is what ended up happening. The Falcons still won without the offense scoring a touchdown, which is bananas in this league. But I have the same exact feeling going into this Bucs game. It's like if the defense is going to hold up, and you've relied on this defense for 4 games in a row, there's going to come a time where you cannot rely on the defense. You cannot rely on the defense for a pick six. You cannot rely on a special teams muff punt touchdown recovery. You cannot rely on a Younghoe Koo career-long 58-yard game-winning field goal. Those are not things that are reliable. Like, those things happen and they're fun when they happen and it's really great, really exciting, but that's not a sustainable way to win games. So going into this Bucs game, it's about finding that stability and finding a way to win games in a sustainable fashion.
Yes, like so all that. Yes. For me, I feel like the defense. Once you get one, I know D. Alford got a sack, but once one of those big guys up front gets a sack, I feel like they start to come because we know Baker Mayfield is going to try to get the ball out of his hands. So I feel like that pressure up the middle, charging D.O., I'm charging Grady, those guys to get that push up the middle because that's going to be a big factor, and get your hands up too because that's going to be one of those things where you can potentially get another, not saying a pick six, but once you get that ball goes up in the air, things can happen. And we saw that play out on Sunday. So we want to thank you for making Atlanta Football Party your first listen today. Why don't you stop by our guy, Aaron Freeman, Locked On Falcons, and make them their second listen. Both of us are free and available wherever you download your podcast. And wherever you download your podcast, make sure you leave us a 5-star review. Stop hating. Don't be a hater all your life. And we'll see you guys on the Atlanta Football Party Dogs Edition with Tanisha Batiste tomorrow.